Hello and welcome to Digital Farm TV Rural News. I'm Andy Walker. Australia has brought together industry stakeholders to develop a national action plan to combat the critical economic and personal devastation being caused by wild dogs across rural Australia. A new national steering committee has been established representing significant national peak bodies and government to guide the project and shape a new strategy for tackling the feral dogs. Wild dogs are responsible for stock losses totalling hundreds of millions of dollars each year from all grazing industries. They are also a source of serious animal-borne diseases. Project Chair and Vice President of Wool Producers Australia, Jim McKenzie, said industry couldn't afford red tape or ill-informed groups prohibiting the use of the tools currently available. A decision announced last week by the federal government to tighten rules pertaining to 457 visas could make it even harder for Australian farmers to find employees, according to the nation's peak agricultural body. Chair of the National Farmers Federation's Workplace Relations Committee, Charles Armstrong, said the government's decision could ultimately hurt Australian farmers. As it was, Australian farmers were already struggling to find employees, and while many opportunities existed for Australian workers to fill job vacancies on Australian farms, the uptake of these opportunities was often low, he said. Backpackers were one of the most important sources of seasonal work for farmers, particularly for fruit picking and crop harvests. But due to the short stay nature of their visas, backpackers were unable to stay and work on farms. The Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority plans to take regulatory action on the chemical phenamyphos, an organophosphate used as an insecticide. The authority's Executive Director, Pesticides, Dr. Raj Bhullar, said last week that an environmental risk assessment report had highlighted a potentially unacceptable risk to birds and aquatic and terrestrial organisms. The main food crops of concern included bananas, carrots, broccoli, Brussels sprouts and cauliflower, potatoes, strawberries, tomatoes, citrus, grapes, mushrooms and sugarcane. Dr. Bhullar said concern with phenamyphos was that it was toxic to environmental organisms. In soil, it had been shown to leach to groundwater where the chemical could remain for a considerable amount of time. New South Wales agronomists will have the opportunity to prepare for the future of insect management in grain crops at a series of workshops set to kick off this month. Workshop facilitator Mark Congreve said last week the pending crisis of insecticide resistance, coupled with the regulatory withdrawal of a number of older insecticide registrations, have prompted a rethink from advisors on the sustainability of their strategies for managing insect pests. The Grains Research and Development Corporation's sponsored workshops will deliver content developed by leading entomologists from state primary industries agencies and private sector. The workshops are to target agronomic advisors looking to improve their understanding and management of insects. This will mean an increased use of tactics such as scouting, applying thresholds, and consideration of paddock history and farm planning in relation to pest management, Mr. Congreve said. Lastly this week, alas for the sacred cow. Beef exports from India are expected to surge 30% this year, giving the country a quarter share of the world market. India's livestock industries, from eggs to pigs to dairy, were expanding rapidly, and it was reportedly growth that directly engaged the poorest people in the country. 3/4 of India's livestock was produced by small-scale farmers, the majority of them women, and by landless people who raised animals at home. Only 3 years ago, India's market share was just 8%, according to the US Department of Agriculture, which predicts that India will be the single biggest exporter of beef globally. Demand was being driven from the Middle East and fast-growing economies in Southeast Asia, countries that wanted low cost. Well, that's it for Digital Farm TV Rural News this week. I hope you join me next week. I'm Andy Walker.